Welcome back to the Why Mindset Matters podcast. I'm Eslana Loa. I'm a speaker, author, resilience mindset coach, a nurse, a midwife, and a mother of four. And if this is somehow the first episode of mine that you've found, I want to provide a trigger warning. I do discuss the loss of my teenage daughter, Rylee, to suicide. In this episode, I want to talk about what happiness is. I was asked recently by a friend of mine who I actually went to uni with. We did our nursing together more than 20 years ago, and we caught up more recently. And she, after discussing what had happened in our lives and catching up over the really long period since we'd seen each other, and then discussing the loss of Rylee and so forth, and she had said to me, I'm writing a book. I'm really intrigued by your outlook on life and the way that you've been able to navigate your grief and loss and the aftermath. And I'm wondering if you would answer some of these questions for me. And it was about what I believe happiness is. And it got me thinking. And once I had time to consider it and sat with it, my response was that I don't believe that happiness is a state of being. I think that, especially as females, we can understand that my state of being as a hormonal creature is ever-changing. And men are no different. We're all hormonal creatures. We're all impacted by our external environment, our internal environment. We're impacted by the moon, like all of these things that are outside of our control. And so our state of being is ever-changing. And if I perceive happiness to be a state of being and my state of being is ever changing, then I'm going to be in this constant pursuit of something that's not sustainable. And in doing so, feel as though I'm constantly failing, because why can't I sustain? Even if I get an experience that feels like happiness and it's fleeting or temporary or so easily changeable and impacted by my external environment or my hormones or whatever it is, then I'm never really going to be happy. And why is that the case? Why can't I sustain it? Instead, I believe that happiness is a perception of my life in spite of my ever-changing state of being. And by that, I mean it's a lens through which I'm able to view my life that isn't dependent on or determined by or even really impacted by my ever-changing state of being. The reality is I would describe myself as the happiest I've ever been. And on paper, that doesn't make sense to a lot of people because of the trauma and the tragedy surrounding Rylee's death and everything that I've been through, and having to learn to rebuild myself and navigate life after unimaginable loss. So obviously, if something is unimaginable, we can't even imagine experiencing it. We definitely can't imagine surviving it. And so to then see that person go, I'm the happiest I've ever been, seems incomprehensible, I'm sure, to some people, but stay with me. The reason that I would say that I am the happiest I've ever been is because my happiness is a perception of my life. And I love where I live. I love everyone in my life. I am so grateful for so many things, including the ability to have been Rylee's mum. I'm so grateful for the capacity that I have had to walk back through the flames of grief day in, day out, to be able to come out the other side stronger for it. And the capacity I have for kindness. Yes, to others 100%, but to myself as well. And that I have been able to use gratitude like an insurance policy to weather the inevitable storms of life that come with grief, because that is inevitable. There will be storms and you never really know when they're going to hit. Grief never leaves you. It just may get a bit quieter as you get better with letting it take up space in the dark corners of your heart and soul, in the same space that do joy and peace and happiness, and the acknowledgement that the duality of them can occur and that they can reside in those same spaces and parts, and that neither negate the presence or validity of the other, but that they reside and exist paradoxically because of each other. Of course I'm sad because I loved her and because I believed that we were going to have longer together, and now I have to live out my life without her. That brings a sadness. But I can also be joy-filled and happy and grateful and all of these things, and that I don't have to be one or the other. I can be very happy and enjoy, and it doesn't take away the sadness that's associated with her absence, and neither does the presence of the sadness negate or take away the opportunity that I have for peace or for joy. And so that's been what I've learned. And if that's the case and that's what can occur, then of course I can perceive my life to be so beautiful. Like I said, I love where I live. I love what I do for work. I love everything in my life and everyone in it. And I've worked really hard to protect my peace and my energy, because that's one very limited resource we have in the aftermath of loss as we navigate grief, is very limited energy. You very quickly run out of fucks left to give for things that just don't deserve your energy, or for staying in rooms too long that you just shouldn't, that you don't need to, or that just aren't necessary. You become very protective of your energy. And so in doing so, I have refined my life, if you like, down to a whole lot of factors that I'm really grateful for, that I love. And I'm very aware that anything that can happen at any time, and that life is not a given, that the only thing we have is right now. And grief will show you the true gravity of that all we have is right now. And even though I thought I was living consciously and present, it pales in comparison to the capacity you have when grief really rips you open and shows you how to be really fucking present. And so I am, on a deeper level, I'm so present. And I think that presence isn't a bad thing. I think it opens you up to even more gratitude, because you're really in the moment. You're really with people. You're really aware, not just of the fragility of life and the aspects that could be anxiety inducing, but aware of the beauty of it. You're aware of all of it. Like, when it rains, I love it. I listen to the rain on a tin roof. When it's sunny, I love and appreciate where we live. It's so beautiful. And I'm in the bush and I feel like I'm way out, surrounded by, and listen to birds every morning and every evening. And it's so beautiful. But at the same time, I'm 5 minutes to Burleigh Beach, which is one of probably the best beaches in the world, because people travel from all over to the Gold Coast, Australia, to holiday here and to go to places like the beach that's 5 minutes from my house. Yet I feel like I'm in the bush. How could you not love that? And I'm on a massive property that my younger version of myself would never have believed I would own one day. Like, how often do we just keep kicking goals in life and never slow our roll to really take stock of how far we've come, or what we've achieved, or what we have succeeded in? And whether that's life, yeah, sure. You know, my younger self grew up in poverty. I never thought I would even own a home, let alone more than 4,000 square meters in Telebudra on the Gold Coast. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And I don't say that to brag in any means. I say it because it would be so easy to get stuck in our grief and not look up and go, this is so fucking beautiful. I actually can't believe it's mine. This is great. Or we just keep moving the goalposts. We set goals and we achieve them, but as we're heading towards achieving them, we just kick the goalposts even further forward by setting a new goal. So there's no slowing down and appreciating the success or celebrating the win. We're just striving, always striving for more. And if you don't slow down, if you don't look up, you miss the whole ride. You miss the point of it. You miss the beauty in it and the opportunity for joy and happiness that life is facilitating if we just slow our roll a little bit and choose the lens through which we look at our life. And even in grief, because if we are honest, our culture and society kind of, at least subconsciously, expects that grief will mean that we kind of give up a lot of our agency. We give up a lot of our right to live in the aftermath of unimaginable loss, because when something is unimaginable and we can't imagine it even happening, we definitely can't imagine surviving it. And when people would ask in the aftermath of our loss, and particularly the way that it unfolded, how are the girls doing, for instance, or how are you guys doing? And I would say, we're doing exceptionally well. Obviously, grief is a bitch. And like I was saying before, the storms visit without warning. If you work with grief, it can reside in the parts that I said, with your heart and soul, that facilitate and allow joy and peace and everything. But that doesn't make you immune to the storms of grief. And sometimes you kind of get to have these joy-filled moments that maybe last longer. And it's almost like grief isn't residing there anymore, and then it will rear its ugly head without warning and remind you, like, bitch, I'm still here. And it's awful, and it'll bring you to your knees, and we're not immune to that. And so I'm not saying that I'm the happiest I've ever been and now I'm immune to grief, or that I don't feel overwhelming sadness, or that I'm not presented with opportunities to practice what I preach. 100%, I constantly am. That's why I'm sharing this, because it works. So yes, what I was saying was that our culture and society would be more inclined to accept when they go, "How are you guys doing?" that we said, "Oh, we're fucked. The kids are fucked. Our mental health is fucked. Everything is just a mess." But they don't expect you to say that they're doing exceptionally well. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know. And I don't mean in a way of denial, but just they're so well adjusted because of the ways that we've chosen to process and really say yes to grief and lean into this experience rather than resist it. It's almost met with a resistance, like that's not culturally acceptable. Because we can't imagine going through what you went through, so we definitely can't imagine being okay on the other side. And it would almost seem more culturally acceptable, like I said, to be completely broken and in some sense of martyrdom to grief's existence. That now it's all consuming and there's no happiness, there's no joy, it's just sorrow and Groundhog Day, just waiting to die. And I don't mean people think this on a conscious level or that there's malicious intent in this kind of undertone to it, but the last thing anybody expects is for you to say that you're the happiest you've ever been. What grief will gift you is this opportunity not just to see that everybody's just hurting, this lens through which you look at life and you just see everybody's pain. And it's a lot to begin with because you don't know if you want to see that. It's hectic. But once we acknowledge that we're having this shared experience of life and that your pain and grief and loss may not look like mine, but it doesn't pale in comparison, it isn't less worthy of recognition or validation, and that happiness and joy are not something that you're not allowed. I remember the first time I found myself laughing after losing Rylee and that imposter syndrome of what the fuck do you think you're doing? You don't get to do that anymore. Joy doesn't live here. You don't get to laugh. You don't get to have happiness. It's kind of like how our imposter syndrome ends up facilitating the martyrdom to grief's existence by way of convincing us that we don't deserve. If you truly loved them, you don't get to be happy, because if you're happy, did you truly love them? Because you must be completely broken by the experience and by the loss. And if we, and it's easy to do, allow and entertain those kinds of thoughts, we end up down the slippery slope into martyrdom. We're existing for grief's sake and in grief and defined by our grief. And so much of our existence is then dictated by it. And that's a horrible thought, that if my soul's agreement with life is that I get to love and live and have passion and adventure, but the flip side is that there will be grief and loss, but in grief and loss I have to give up my whole soul and my existence to the experience of it, then who would choose that? Especially if grief and loss visits itself upon you in an earlier stage in life like it has on mine. I'm only 43. Am I going to live out the rest of my life in this hole facilitated by grief and this ugliness? Or do I get to have the acknowledgement that this is a part of my story, but I'm not going to let it define my story? That I can be aware that those two parts of me can reside in the same parts of my heart and soul, grief, sadness, but also joy and peace and happiness. And if I allow them to take up space in me, but not drive the wheel or take over the house that is my soul, but rather acknowledge and allow and accept that they make up a part of the journey, I can facilitate a journey for myself that lends itself to increasing amounts of joy and peace and happiness in spite of my sadness and pain. And so happiness is definitely something that I would say is completely achievable by anyone in any circumstances of your life, because if it's a lens through which you view your life, then that lens is interchangeable at any point. And if you go, but you don't understand my life, like there's nothing to be happy about, then change it. Either change the lens through which you view your life so that you can have a more peaceful and joyful experience, or change the parts of your life that you can that facilitate you having a more peaceful and joyful experience would be my advice. Because how your lived experience impacts your perception of your life has less to do with the environmental factors of where you sit socioeconomically, the environmental factors of your home or your car, or all these things that we might think that contribute towards our happiness or our discontent. Those environmental factors aren't the determinants of happiness, I don't believe. It's the lens through which we view our life. Because even though I've said, we've kicked these goals and we own a home and whatever, the bank owns a home, let's be real, we have a mortgage. We just happen to have a mortgage on a beautiful property that I'm grateful for. But even if it wasn't, some of the happiest days I had before, we owned nothing. We were in a tiny little rental and in the honeymoon phase of our love, and just you could barely swing a cat around and we were happy. And I think back to the perception we had of our reality. It wasn't determined by the environmental factors that was probably the least nice place we lived in. And so I don't want you to get caught up in thinking that, but you don't understand where I'm sitting in life. You can be happy now. You can have a perception of happiness in spite of the external factors of your life. And the parts that you're not content with or aren't inciting joy and peace in your life are yours to dictate and control. Because our mindset is the very thing that determines how our lived experience impacts us as a person, as a soul, as a being here. And so I would encourage you to reflect on the fact that your mindset matters in every area of your life, that essentially we are actually accountable and responsible for our mindset, because let's be real, it's the lens through which we view our life. And that lens and our perception of our life is completely changeable. If we have the courage to get uncomfortable enough to choose to view it from different angles, then we can view the same thing differently and have a very different lived experience as a result. So that is what I believe happiness is, and I hope that you got something from it. I would encourage you, if it resonated with you, to share it with anyone you think would be interested in hearing it. I'm Eslana Loa. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Why Mindset Matters. You can follow me on Instagram at Eslana Loa. I very much look forward to sharing everything that I have to offer in the coming episodes with you, and I'll see you in the next episode.